Hi, this is Tom Jacobs from tdjacobs.com and also healingsuicide.com. I'm an evolutionary astrologer and also an energy worker and a channel. And at healingsuicide.com, you'll find an explanation of the soul's journey, how it understands your human life, and also how to deal, like what happens after death, and how to deal with despair. Tips and tricks for how to deal with the kinds of feelings that may lead to suicide. And then at tdjacobs.com, there's a lot of tools and resources, educational tools, consultations, soul's journey soundbites, all those kinds of things. And also energetically programmed crystals, which during December 2018 are 25% off. Use the code I am empowered, one word, no spaces. Anyway, so I spent a lot of years developing resources, and now, the last year or so, I've been focusing on putting up shorter YouTube videos to teach more about how I do astrology. And also recently, I've been doing some channeling stuff too on YouTube. Today's video was a request, kind of. It was on my list to do for a while, and it's the person, and then somebody commented on the transiting Jupiter for the Pluto and Scorpio generation. Will you do one on for the Sagittarius generation, since Jupiter just went into Sagittarius? And I said, yes, it was on my list. So I'm going to do that. But what we're going to do, actually wrote up my little game plan here. I'm going to talk about a little about Jupiter and Sagittarius, and then I'm just to give you a setup for the framework of how to think about it. And then I'm going to talk about the conjunction to Pluto and Sagittarius for that generation. And then sextile Pluto and Libra, square Pluto and Virgo generation, and then trine Pluto and Leo generation, to give you an overview of the kinds of things you might expect, and to understand what the transit itself means. So we're covering these transits. We don't have any, I don't have any access to Pluto and Gemini people who were born before 1913, 1915, 16. But anyway, so we're covering these this handful of generations. So first of all, just an overview of Jupiter and Sagittarius, and I do have an hour-long MP3 that I just released a few weeks ago that will explain the whole story, as well as what to expect during the retrograde and a couple major aspect patterns during its transit. The basic idea is Jupiter, well, I believe strongly we have to get away from the idea that Jupiter is this greater malefic, or the bringer of gifts, or sorry, the greater benefic. Sorry, I'm mixing up my words. But the bringer of gifts, and makes everything better, and you should look forward to Jupiter transits. Jupiter wants you to seize opportunity and be open to new possibilities. Well, Jupiter transits often show us where we're not open to possibilities. So sometimes the benefit of a Jupiter transit is in not taking that opportunity or not having confidence in ourselves. So it wants us to give life a chance, give ourselves a benefit of the doubt, have faith and leap and, trust our gut instinct. But we may, during the transits, find out that we don't have faith, or we're not willing to trust, or we don't like ourselves. So anyway, I view Jupiter transits through a more complex lens than, some people might, because you have to overcome the garbage you're carrying and be willing to let it go before you can pick up that awesome thing over there. Okay, so anyway, Jupiter brings opportunity, but you have to realize if you're not open and overcome that. So that's a basic idea. Jupiter and Sagittarius, specifically evaluating what your beliefs are. What will you allow is true? What do you believe is possible? Will you have confidence? Will you have faith? Will you step out to have a new adventure or to do something new? So that's kind of the idea. And again, that Jupiter and Sagittarius MP3, which is an hour long and covers the whole transit, will be very useful to you. So now thinking about Jupiter transiting Pluto, so I want to make this a little more expansive of a teaching than just Jupiter and Sagittarius for the Pluto and Sagittarius generation. But Jupiter transiting Pluto, Jupiter asking questions: will you have faith? Do you have confidence? Will you imagine that tomorrow's better, can be better? Will you take steps now to invest in yourself? Right? We think of that energy of, the greater benefic, or the Santa Claus figure, so to speak, that kind of bringing you a gift. Well, will you gift yourself with understanding and forgiveness? Will you gift yourself with the benefit of the doubt that you're always learning, and what looks like a mistake, in fact, is fodder for your learning journey, stimulus for your learning journey? Now, Pluto represents deeper things under the surface about power. When I go deeply into Plutonian teaching, we have to face shadow work. We have to look at what hurts, what we regret, guilt, shame, depressiveness, anger. I call it the list of terrible things. Jealousy, revenge fantasies, manipulation, lying, cheating, stealing, you know, all these kinds of terrible things that we don't want to go into. Well, Pluto for me in a birth chart represents the cache of emotional memories for many lifetimes of when that house and sign, you know, specifically in a chart, when that went really well and the person felt empowered, and when it didn't go well, when that person felt disempowered or powerless. So Pluto for me in a birth chart represents the best and worst potentials for that person in this lifetime as far as how she treats herself and others, or you know, how he responds to pain and anger, but also that those responses and those conceptions of self are based in the cache of things from many, many lifetimes. So like this cache of emotional memories that are unconscious that drive our outward behavior. And those kind of conscious memories are, again, when it goes well, when it doesn't go well, but we remember when it doesn't go well a little more often, a little more strongly. And most people spend a tremendous amount of energy avoiding having to have their Plutos triggered. So that's our little setup here. Jupiter in transit saying, will you expand, right? But it's asking the question of Pluto, you know, which in a person represents this cache, this very deep cache of emotional issues. Okay, now I was thinking about the conjunction of Pluto. It's going to, for Pluto and Sagittarius people, and these are births from I'm going to do this right, 1995 to 2008. And check the ephemeris. I believe it's like even January of 95 to January of 2008, but check the ephemeris. Or I'll put the dates into this description for these generations. Of course, of the ones we're talking about in this video, the youngest of these 4 generations. And so, you know, some of these people are kids and teenagers, right? The youngest of them will be almost 11 years old. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so we have that generation of youngsters. So the conjunction infuses Jupiterian energy, and it can make things louder. Jupiter can make things bigger and louder. So for the Pluto and Sagittarius person who may be hiding guilt or shame, or may feel powerless or depressive, right? Depressed about something, or may feel jealousy or so hurt, because all Pluto placements can represent feeling so hurt that anger and revenge comes out. We don't, or can be inspired. We don't want to be like that. But sometimes we don't know what to do with this giant bolus of energy within us. So Jupiter conjuncting the Pluto and Sagittarius, you know, you might find, you know, you or the person in your life who has this placement, the young person, with anger or depressiveness or clamming up or, you know, not treating the self well or being bitter and snippy and snappy and, you know, and even bitchy. You know, you might find that exacerbated, right? Because Jupiter is trying to press on the Pluto to make the things get expressed. Just one note, it's not in the natural order of things for a human to suppress energy and emotion or to hold on to unhappy things that generate malfunction later. It's not normal. In other words, our consciousnesses are systems that are always trying to regulate by pulling up the crappy stuff to get resolved and released and healed. Jupiter, as a teacher in transit, will make that louder perhaps. Now, it may also bring confidence. It'll probably do both. Bring confidence, and sometimes, you know, that idea of empowerment. Do I feel like I can make my own decisions? Of course, some of these people are kids. But if you think about it, you can kind of watch this happen in real time. The oldest of the kids will have Pluto, those born in early 1995 in those first few years, are having Jupiter conjunct the Pluto right now. And the youngest of the kids will have it at the end of Jupiter's transit in approximately a year or just under a year. It'll be active. So you can think it's going to even stagger out throughout the generation. But just be aware that there may be an infusion of bigness into that depth of feeling place where, you know, Pluto's a thing we need to do to make life meaningful, but again has that sometimes that cache of difficulty and pain and fear and fear and regret, sometimes anxiety as well. Pluto in Sagittarius natally has a lot to do with being wounded by what one has believed. And that can be a religious or a secular thing. So Jupiter in Sagittarius is saying, what do you believe? Will you believe something better? Will you upgrade your beliefs? And on that Pluto in Sagittarius natal position, it may infuse this bigness into the loss of faith or the pessimism, or it may even trigger irrational exuberance, you know, where the person has to learn through, you know, guessing and realizing, wait a minute, I need to find my facts, like, you know, Sagittarius excesses, which are part of the potential Pluto wounding, like having to guess about something and not listening to data, you know, not paying attention to reality, have trusting hunches over everything, like President Trump has a strong Sagittarius signature, and he recently said, which, you know, many of you may have heard, that he trusts his own gut more. His gut is smarter than the brains of anybody else. That's a Sagittarius malfunction. So anyway, so you might find some of the Sagittarius things get louder. Now, as I say this, and I meant to include this in the intro a couple minutes ago, the way that Jupiter transits function, you might have one conjunction or one pass of the aspect being exact, or you might have three. And the idea is that, you know, the planet, you know, except for Sun and Moon, the planets have retrograde periods where, from the Earth's perspective, each appears to go backward. So what happens is, in this case, Jupiter will, it entered on November 8th, right, 0 Sagittarius, and then at 24 degrees and 21 minutes of Sagittarius, about April 10th, it will station or seem to turn around. And then it will begin a 4-month retrograde period where it appears to be moving backward. So if you, and then it will go back to, I believe it's 14, let me just confirm that, in about August 10th or 11th, it goes back to like 14.5 degrees on August 11th. And so if you have something at 2 or 3 Sagittarius, or 5 or 6 or 8, you're getting one pass. If you have something at 14, or between 14 and 23, you're getting 3 passes. So that's the kind of idea. So keep in mind where that Pluto in Sagittarius is makes a difference, and you should look up in the chart and all that. There are also free ephemeris files, PDFs, on astro.com, and I'll link in the description to this so you could actually learn to look it up by hand or manually if you have it's digital online, but you can learn to look it up that way as well if you want. So the conjunction will infuse energy into whatever feels wrong or the need to be strong and empowered and confident for those people. Now keep in mind, some of these are kids. So what is it, you know, how do you, assuming you're an adult who has maybe a kid with Jupiter and Sagittarius, how do you deal with your kid getting sad or feeling depressed sometimes, or depressive? My thing about depression, I just want to mention this too. My thing about depression is when we use the word depressed, talk about depression, the way that we have come to talk about it, I believe, leads us into this dead end feeling that it can't be returned from. So I like to talk about depressiveness. Depressiveness is a normal part of the human experience. Feeling a little sad or, you know, deflated or something, that's normal. It's when we get stuck there that it becomes a problem. And that can be a Plutonian issue for any generation, because again, or any, you know, Pluto in any sign, because Pluto does have to do with when we have felt powerless at different times, or what holds us back from giving ourselves permission to be confident and be in charge of our lives. And if you think about the nature of being a child, lots of times you don't have a lot of control over your life. And so, you know, just think about if you have a kid or a grandkid with Jupiter and Sagittarius or Pluto and Sagittarius, just realize that whatever that story is may be a little louder right now. The door might be open to process and release some things, pessimism or depressiveness or something like that. Now, moving on to, let me just say this too, actually. One of the things I do quite often for people are these short readings called Soul's Journey Soundbites. And in, roughly 20, 23 minutes, it always says 20 minutes on my site, but sometimes they're a little longer. I give an overview of the entire multi-life journey, focusing a lot on the Pluto story. Over half of the 20 minutes is always about Pluto. So if you want to really understand how you're wired or other people are wired, the soundbite is a great way to go. And of course, we're in December. It's a gift-giving time, and these are the gifts of insight. So I just encourage you, if you want to understand more about yourself or your loved ones, Soul Journey Soundbites, are great. I'm also offering the option of ordering a transcription for another additional fee at the same time. So I will take care of the transcription. You can have them in both formats. Okay, so moving on to the sextile to Pluto and Libra, same Jupiter questions. Will you allow that tomorrow can be better? Will you expand? Will you have more faith? All that. But it will sextile, which means poking, tickling, triggering, stimulating Pluto and Libra. Now the Pluto and Libra deal is the need for connection, harmony, justice, balance, togetherness. Jupiter in Sagittarius will ask Pluto and Libra people, and that generation is some in basically 1972 to like early 1984. So all these subgenerations have a lot of people, right? Running around with these signatures. So it's quite a lot of people. And the main wounding is to fairness, equality, justice, and also togetherness. So being listened to, but also loneliness is a huge issue with people with Pluto and Libra. Sometimes people with Pluto and Libra find themselves in stretches of their lives where they're alone, or they're not dating, they can't get to it, or they can't let go of that other person from the past, so they can't be open. So there's this kind of thing about learning to process what it means to be alone, and also dealing with other people's opinions of you. And if you have a need to be liked, that actually makes you be a chameleon person, and you might not feel like you have your own backbone because it seems like other people have the power to approve of you or not. So Pluto and Libra, this is the generation that I'm in. And so Pluto and Libra, sometimes we work really hard to be good listeners, to be compassionate with others because we want to be liked. We need to be liked. The deepest wounding is about that. But also the skill and the passion and purpose with Pluto and Libra is in bringing justice and harmony in whatever way, might happen. So the sextile from Jupiter in Sagittarius to Pluto, I was saying Judo, I was combining those two, to Pluto and Libra is stimulating the wound about loneliness, which says, hey, be more outgoing. Really? Like poking. Sextiles poke such that, really? You're just going to sit there and have this shitty idea of who you are? You're just going to sit there and be lonely? Really? You're not going to give other people a chance? Really? The sextiles poke you until you respond. Like imagine somebody sitting next to you and going, hey, 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 and you're trying to listen to something or do something else. That's the feeling of a sextile. And Jupiter, of course, is loud and big. So for the Pluto subgeneration, the main thing is about giving yourself a chance to be open to new experience. And that's really the thing. Now keep in mind where your Pluto is in that scheme. Keep in mind Jupiter will retrograde at starting at 24 Sagittarius and go back to 14, right, from April 10th to August 11th or whatever. So keep in mind that you may have one sextile or you may have three, and that's worth looking up again in the ephemeris if you don't already know how to do that. But that sextile requires action. Now, if you respond, you will likely be pleasantly surprised. Because Jupiter is essentially saying, really, you're going to settle for that crummy belief that makes you not like yourself? Okay. On that note, Pluto and Libra is also about the need to learn actual negotiation and compromise that doesn't compromise our values or self-respect. So the Jupiter sextile here is also saying, well, you have to speak up about that. Really? You're going to sit there and like not have a boundary? Really? So that's the kind of egging on that Jupiter sextile the Pluto and Libra may do. Okay. Moving on to the square to Pluto and Virgo. First, I'll explain the Pluto and Virgo deal, and then I'll talk about what the square means or what it's about. With Pluto and Virgo, and these are the births from some in 1956, but 1957, 1958, up until like 1971, 72. And so these are all the people born in the 60s, plus some in the late 50s, obviously, and early 70s. Virgo is about improving things or making things better. It's about being of service. It's also about being analytical, detail-oriented, meaning picky and discerning, and discriminating in the broad sense of that, not because of like, differences between people and discrimination, but noticing different things and ascribing different values to them and making choices. So discernment. Pluto in Virgo says, I'm trying to be of service, but sometimes I don't measure up, or sometimes I don't have the right skills, or I didn't prepare enough. Or I'm trying to help you, but sometimes you don't want it, and that hurts me. Because sometimes my self-esteem might be based on if I'm of use, if my efforts are valued, right? So there's a good enough thing that can be part of the wounding with Pluto and Virgo. So this generation can be fantastic at being of service and being of help and being detail-oriented. And yet they also might feel guilt or shame if they didn't help enough or didn't try, or if they worked themselves ragged, their fingers to the bone, and it still didn't really make a difference. That's very painful for people with Pluto and Virgo. Sometimes you'll find them with boredom and ennui and who cares because they've given up trying. And sometimes you'll find them working non-stop because they need their sense of empowerment that life is worth living may rest upon the ability to make a difference, to make a positive difference. Okay, squares are pressure, tension, and friction. So I said the sextile is like this goading and this egging on and poking thing with this Pluto and Libra people. The square from Jupiter and Sagittarius to Pluto and Virgo is more like pressing on, which can be in fact pulling from under the surface something that's hidden or stuck under the surface that really needs to be resolved. So the square from Jupiter and Sagittarius, what are you willing to believe? What will you allow as possible? Are you willing to let tomorrow be better? Are you willing to do something to create a better tomorrow? These kinds of like challenges to pessimism, right? Invitations to optimism, to allowing things, to be possible. Squaring the Pluto and Virgo, some people in that generation will find themselves feeling that guilt and that shame louder, that self-doubt, that regret, the judgment of others from the past that they somehow internalized, it'll get louder. Now, it may be very uncomfortable to be in that position, but the point is, Jupiter is pressing on that unhappiness, that powerlessness or the feeling of disempowerment, so it can come to the surface and you can overcome it. So Jupiter's saying, is it really true that you didn't do something right or you're not worthy? Is it really true that you have to do something to be loved or worth loving? That's a problem with Pluto and Virgo. I have to be perfect or be good at something to be worth loving. That's a really, I'm almost getting emotional because I have a sweet spot in my heart, a soft spot for people with Pluto and Virgo, as I mentioned when I do these videos sometimes on Pluto, because just people judging themselves so harshly, it just, it just gets me. But anyway, Jupiter transit is pressing on the wound, but also saying, hey, if you do this other way, like if you approach it from this other angle, you might have more success and be happier. So Jupiter might simultaneously, for some people with the signature, press on the problem while offering a solution that if you just were willing to get over that idea that you're not worth it, or that you did it wrong, or you deserve judgment, or don't deserve support. If you just let go of that, then everything would open up, but you'd have to change who you think you are. So that's the square from Jupiter and Sagittarius. And again, keep in mind where if you have this, or your friends or loved ones, think about that range of 14 to 24 degrees of Virgo. And again, if it's, you know, if you're born in 1957 with Pluto and Virgo, or 1972 or 71, you will only have one pass, right? But if you're born in the middle of that, we know you're going to have multiple passes. So look that up and be aware of that. Okay, and the criticism from Sagittarius to Virgo, this natural squaring, you know, here, do it this other way, is what squares often say, or you're doing it wrong. Why don't you change everything you're doing and do it this way, because you'll be happier, more successful. And you're like, why would I not do what I'm inclined to do? Anyway, that squaring energy from Jupiter in Sagittarius says, if you just gave yourself the benefit of the doubt, if you just let yourself expand, if you just noticed that you could learn new things, you don't have to hold yourself accountable for past mistakes, right? Then you can advance and expand. Okay, now moving on to the last part of this video, and it's the trine to Pluto and Leo. And these dates are, I might make this I think it's 1937-ish, 38, those both parts of both of those years, up to 1956, 57. So before the Pluto and Virgo people. And so this is the baby boomer generation, obviously. So lots of you people out there. Now, let me just describe what Pluto and Leo is about. The need is to self-express. Life is worth living if I can contribute something personal, if I can leave a mark or develop a personal style or signature. And the wounding is if I don't feel special, or if I can't play, or I'm punished for being playful and spontaneous, if my performance is ignored or nobody cares about my contribution. One of the worst things with Pluto and Leo is for one's voice to be lost in the crowd. I always think of with Pluto and Leo, I always think of she's not the only person who did this, but I think of my mom's sister, my aunt, who would always have loud glasses. Like she'd have glasses that were like bright red frames. And they were just super loud, and it was like a way of like announcing, you know what? Hey, I got some fire. You know, it was a way of like announcing, you know. And that image always pops up in my head of like she would otherwise be, you know, dressed maybe not conservatively, but like, you know, like an adult woman. But then she'd have this like glasses, you know, announcing her Pluto and Leo. Anyway, so they need to express and play, right? But the pain has come from doing that. They need to feel attractive, but the pain might come from being used for that or not being found attractive. So all these kinds of Leonine expressive things. One of the core things about Pluto and Leo is having an opinion and expressing it. So Jupiter trine a planet, let's now move into that analysis. Jupiter trine a planet is saying, hey, bring yourself out there, come out, show us who you are. It's like a cheerleader. It's like encouraging you. It's trying to boost. It's sending this infusion of supportive energy in there. But the key to this is that if you are hiding, and let's say you have Pluto and Leo, and you feel like you have been shamed for having a voice or an opinion, or laughing too loudly, is kind of like something that other people wouldn't take so seriously, but people with Pluto and Leo who've been shamed for being loud, like that can be an event that recalls wounding from many lifetimes. But anyway, if you're somebody like that who's internalizing and you won't express, Jupiter might send this trine, this boosting energy, and saying, sure, like, why should you? But if you're saying it's important for me to express, Jupiter would say, of course it is. So essentially, Jupiter in trine to something will be a cheerleader for whatever it's wanting to do or inclined to do or is already doing. Now, Jupiter trine Pluto and Leo, person will likely feel this burst of inspiration to express. But again, if there's a limiting belief, if there's some wounding structure or something that takes over and says, well, but I mean, when I was a kid, I was never allowed to play, or nobody encouraged my creativity, or whatever it is, then that might take over, and Jupiter will say, oh, okay, sure, that's the frequency you're on. I respect that. Keep doing that. Keep in mind that from your soul's perspective, whether you express or don't express, right? And Pluto and Virgo, with Pluto and Leo, with Pluto and Virgo, whether you serve or don't serve, Pluto and Libra, whether you are being fair or just or not, you know, Pluto in Sagittarius, whether you believe something healthy or believe something unhealthy, or have optimism, pessimism, whatever it is, your soul is learning through the experience. So if you are Pluto and Leo and you're feeling down, Jupiter may make it louder again, so you see it. So you see it, and it probably will be very obvious that other people are enjoying themselves, which will be a way of Jupiter infusing energy into yours by saying, we're all over here having a good time. Why do you think you should sit over there and be unhappy? And the trine will be supportive of, again, whatever you're doing with that natal planet. So do you have a right to have a voice? Jupiter can help you bring it out. If you feel you don't, Jupiter will say, that's cool. Other people have voices, and so you have to listen to their noise. So that's the kind of idea. One other note, which I meant to include in the beginning and didn't, because Jupiter's, oh my God, the words. Mercury is almost stationing, so I'm having to try to stay on task here with my brain-mouth connection. If you have Pluto retrograde natally, the story's changed a little bit. Pluto retrograde says, I'm not quite sure what the right way to do this thing is, house, sign, and aspect. I'm not quite sure what to do. So I might mimic what looks normal, but I need to invent my own way of doing it. So just keep in mind that, like, if you have Pluto and Leo in its retrograde, you might have always been hesitant or reticent to share your creativity or to make noise or have an opinion, or share an opinion. If you have Pluto and Virgo, you might not be sure what's worth serving or if you're doing it right. If you have Pluto and Libra, you might be wondering, like, what's the right way to be in a relationship, or how should I talk to people, or should I even talk to people? And Pluto, in Sagittarius, what's worth believing in? If that's retrograde, that does change the story a little bit. I encourage you to get a Soul's Journey Soundbite to get the full story, the 20-minute multi-life, not just an overview of this life, but a multi-life overview for you of your entire soul's journey and what it's trying to get you to learn and how to resolve karmic garbage and step into better choices. And that's at tdjacobs.com, along with all the other things I offer, including the energetically programmed crystals and stones, which again, during December are 25% off. Use the code IAMEMPOWERED at checkout. So take care of yourself. Thanks for the suggestion to the person who reminded me this was on my list, but I hadn't gotten to it. And take care of yourself.